Welcome inside Appalachia. I'm Mason Adams. This week, a West Virginia artist who designs stickers, t-shirts, and pins draws on classic Appalachian phrases her family has used for years. They're not all radio friendly.
My mom and my aunt, actually, their favorite is Welched at Fire. My aunt was actually buried in a Welched at Fire hat. She wore it all throughout chemo.
People who live near Indian Creek in southern West Virginia say something is wrong with the water. Tests show contamination from a nearby mine. Now people and animals are getting sick.
James and Richard showed me a picture of a dead deer that they had gutted along the riverbank. Its veins were bright yellow.
And lots of schools are seeing teacher shortages. But what happens when the band director quits? You'll hear these stories and more this week inside Appalachia. Welcome inside Appalachia. I'm Mason Adams. So we're starting the show out today with a guest.
Hey, Mason.
Hey, Maddie. Maddie Miller is one of our new Folkways reporters here on Inside Appalachia.
So, Mason, do you have any stickers?
It's funny you say that. I've actually got a few right here on my desk in front of me. I've got a Wood Brothers Racing sticker. I've got one from West Virginia Public Broadcasting that says, working with WVPB is cat-tastic, and it's got an orange cat with sunglasses. And then one, it says, Drink Floyd, and it sort of mimics the cover of Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon, except for it's our local coffee roasters.
Coffee shops are one of my favorite places to find stickers, too. That's actually where I first saw the stickers from Hippie's Daughter. It's a shop run by Elizabeth Ellswick out of St. Albans, West Virginia.
Cool, and I understand you interviewed Elizabeth as well?
Yeah.
Let's check out that interview.
Okay. Hippie's Daughter, where's the name come from for the shop?
It's actually pretty funny. The name was born before the business was ever born, probably a couple years before. My dad, both of my parents actually are hippies. My dad's hair is probably almost down to his butt now, but my husband always called him a hippie. So one day my husband's like, "You're the hippie's daughter." I'm like, okay, we're going to keep that. We're going to put it in our pocket. And then when I started the business a few years later, that was the only option.
Do you remember seeing a lot of West Virginia merch and different memorabilia, stuff like that when you were growing up?
Not really growing up. It would be at huge events like the old Regatta before they brought it back. But most of the time it would just be like little buttons or T-shirts or like the big bumper stickers.
So was that like some of your inspiration for making West Virginia related merchandising?
Yeah, it's kind of a niche, which there's a lot of people that do it now. So I've focused more on Appalachia now. But there was kind of a void in stickers in general. And it's, if you're like a millennial or Gen Z, then you grew up with Lisa Frank. You probably had stickers all the time and put them on everything. And when we turned into adults, we didn't really have any.
I totally agree. And I was one of those kids, I didn't stick my stickers on anything. Yes. I kept them all in a folder because I was too scared. And I for sure do that like with stickers I buy now related to this. Like I hang them on my wall and stuff like that. I'm very scared to commit to sticking them anywhere. What do you see people doing with your stickers when they buy them?
I think the most common is like putting them on your laptops or water bottles. I've seen them on cars here and there. And then there's also people like us who just kind of save them forever because you don't know what to do with them.
What do you think then with people putting them in such public places? Do you think that's part of the appeal for West Virginia stickers is like a signifier? Like, hey, look, I'm from West Virginia too.
Yeah, and West Virginia in general, the residents here, they're very proud. So they always have West Virginia merch. So it's like another way for everybody to express themselves.
You had said, too, with inspiration-wise, you got them from, like, sayings and different family members and things.
Yeah. Most of everything that I use is things that my family's always said, like, come hell or high water. Newer one that I did was one that my dad says a lot, which is, like, you'll say, what you doing? And he'll say, oh, just mildewing. My mom says fiddle fart all the time. Like, they're all just things that we've all heard growing up here in West Virginia or in Appalachia.
I noticed a lot of them have like skeletons and like that kind of thing. Is that kind of Gothic inspiration also like that? Is that just your personal interest, or is that something that you think also kind of aligns with some of the West Virginia vibes?
It's more so me. I'm an elder emo, but there is like that Appalachian Gothic type. We've always had kind of weird customs where, your family's buried in the yard or the casket's in the house when they die. Like it's kind of, Appalachia is kind of Gothic. The most popular is probably Welsh Fire. Everybody stops it when they see that one. Locally, it's a lot of like the coal miner ones. They'll buy it because their dad or grandpa were in the mines.
So do you want to describe your new shop?
It's I think it was built in 1950. It's just a center block building, literally split in half. So right now I'm working in the back half, which is like a warehouse garage, big garage door on it, while we remodel the front half so that I can put retail in the front.
Why do West Virginia related stickers versus just like any kind of art stickers?
When I started, I did a lot of West Virginia plus just like nature related things and dabbled in some other things. After a few years of that, I realized I just need to like niche it down because it's already out of control with how many stickers I have. So I just niched it down to like West Virginia, Appalachia things with a few other random things too in there that I just love. Like aliens, skeletons. Definitely a lot of black and white. It's my favorite. Let's see, we got a snake. We've got a devil hand. Fixin' and Y'all are really popular. Bless Your Heart's classic. Lollygag. Everybody should lollygag. It is what it is. I mean, because it is. Lord Willin' and the Creek Don't Rise, another classic. My grandpa always says, watch for deer.
It's like the Appalachian I love you.
Classic.
Yeah, you're out the door. Okay, watch for deer. Drive safe.
All of these sayings hit very close to home for me, and I know they do for other people as well. So I kind of just wanted to keep those nostalgic sayings going. My mom and my aunt, actually, their favorite is Welsh Fire. My aunt was actually buried in a Welsh Fire hat last year. She wore it all throughout chemo. It was her absolute favorite. She was like my number one fan. Obviously, it hits very close to home for me. So I do like to use these nostalgic sayings to kind of hit close to home for others as well. And it's really cool when I do events that people come up and tell me a lot of those stories. Mm-hmm. Or I'll even get like an email or a message online about like why they bought this and this because of this person. So it's really sweet.
And we've talked a lot about nostalgia having like inspiration in your designs. Why do you think nostalgia, just as a personal interest here, is such a big influence in a lot of things that are relating to West Virginia? Like, why are we always missing something?
I think it goes back to West Virginia is unique in, we're all very prideful to be from West Virginia. We literally would die for this state. And it, a lot of us grew up with very close families. Like some of my cousins are like my siblings. Like a lot of people grew up with that, like going to mama's, getting the good country food and everything. So I think it's very ingrained in us to want to reminisce on all of that because we spend a lot of time with our families.
And so do you think like part of that, not only are we like constantly missing and being very close-knit families, but very close-knit to the land? Do you see that melding of like missing the environment?
Absolutely. In 1957, my grandpa bought 35-ish acres in the Monongalia National Forest. So I got to go there multiple times a year and grow up there with no neighbors, no electricity, just the land. So that also inspired me a lot, but it's really just part of growing up in West Virginia. But yeah, it is kind of like a badge of like, hey, I'm from West Virginia or I'm from somewhere else in Appalachia and I'm proud of it.
That interview is part of our Folkways reporting project, which covers arts and culture in the region. You can find dozens more Folkways stories at our website, wvpublic.org. This year's Pulitzer Prize for Literature went to West Virginia writer Jane Ann Phillips for her novel Night Watch. Phillips has been writing for nearly 50 years, and her home state has often figured into her books. Night Watch takes readers to the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, a mental hospital in the town of Weston. The book is set several years after the end of the Civil War. Last fall, producer Bill Lynch spoke with Phillips about Night Watch and growing up near the asylum.
So how did you start with Night Watch?
My work tends to start with a voice. I started out as a poet, so I tend to sort of hear lines and then kind of be into writing something about a very specific character in a specific voice. And that person is involved in some kind of situation that I may not even really understand in terms of the future. But I started writing the section that begins the novel. Sometimes the beginning section will end up 50 pages in or 100 pages in, but this time it stayed as the beginning. And we have this 12-year-old girl who's basically the adult in her family for the past 2 years. She's a bit of an unreliable narrator because it becomes clear that she doesn't remember everything and that she hasn't been necessarily told her true history. So there are a lot of mysteries involved. We do know that they're on their way to the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. Connolly believes that she's helping this man that she has been told to call Papa get her mother to the asylum for her, quote, rest and cure. But they get to the asylum and Connolly says, should I help her down? Should I help her in? And he says, well, she's not going in without you. And it turns out that he's abandoning them.
The book is set following the Civil War. Why that generation?
Well, it's the third in a war trilogy, really, starting with Machine Dreams, which had to do with the Vietnam War, and then Lark and Termite, which had to do with the Korean War. It just seemed natural to go back to the Civil War because it casts such a shadow over us in our time. I mean, it's a time in which there were migrations of people, separated families, scant resources, divided populations who had more or less tribal allegiances to one belief or the other. And I wanted to look at what happened to real people, a family caught up in all this. The book really unspools various secrets throughout. And I was delighted that that happened because I think life is a lot like that. And I feel as though, the title, Night Watch, is the perfect title because it's about those people, no matter the time, no matter the situation, who are sort of moral fulcrums, in a sense, within their own families, within their own communities. And it just is their tendency or their natures to try to protect, to try to keep going. And I feel as though no matter the chaos, human nature and historical nuance bends toward the Night Watch, protecting what is until it's safe. So those were some of the ideas that I was playing with. I also loved going back to a time that was pre-industrial, a time when, despite the chaos of human interactions, the world was in some ways untouched. The idea that people lived so in harmony with nature, that it took them all day to simply put up their food and take care of their patch of ground. But they were living very close to, the natural world.
You're from West Virginia originally. So the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum it's a landmark. How much did you know about it when you lived here as opposed to, when you went away and where you are now and writing about it?
Well, I grew up in Buchanan, so that's 20 minutes, from Weston. The Weston State Asylum was actually still operating even into the late 60s and 70s. Then, of course, it was shut down. And thank goodness someone purchased the building, and it's now a nonprofit. And every time I go back to West Virginia, I go there. I'm just fascinated by the building itself and the fact that it's one of nearly every state had one of these huge Kirkbride institutions. And of course, I've done a lot of research into Thomas Story Kirkbride and his life and his ideas, which were really extremely contemporary. The idea that each person should be treated humanely, no matter what their mental illness might be. And Kirkbride's ideas were set out in a book that's oft quoted in the novel. And asylums all over the country were built according to his very, very specific plans. But he believed in a treatment regimen for each person that had to do with long walks on nature trails that went back through the mountains, maybe working around the institution. They had their own dairy, their own vegetable gardens, their own very beautiful flower gardens. And he also believed that people could improve and be released from the asylum. And if they had more difficulty later on, they would come back. He didn't see any problem with that. He believed that we could be treated in such a way that we can find our own balance.
As someone from Appalachia, do you think you see the region differently than someone who's not from here? How do you see Appalachia?
Well, West Virginia is the only state that is completely within. And it's always bothered me, for instance, that many educated Americans don't know that West Virginia fought on the side of the Union, that they seceded from Virginia and fought on the side of the Union. So I wanted to present this particular part of Appalachia, which I think of as being in the tri-state area, sort of northwestern West Virginia.
The book is Night Watch. Jane Ann Phillips, thank you very much.
Coming up, access to clean water is an ongoing issue in southern West Virginia. In one community, residents say their water runs black, and they're waiting on a fix. You're Inside Appalachia. I'm Mason Adams.
Support for Inside Appalachia is provided by Concord University, educating the people of our region and beyond for more than 150 years. More information at concord.edu.
Residents of Wyoming County, West Virginia, say there's something wrong with the water in the local creek. One resident, Dakota Day, says fish are dying, and even pets. He recently spoke with Mountain State Spotlight reporter Aaron Beck.
You see all these chicken pens, every one of these is full of roosters last year, and whenever this stuff happened, all my roosters got sick and died.
Whenever what happened?
When I started watering them out of that creek, whatever's coming down that creek.
But were you watering them with that before?
Yeah, I've always watered them with it.
And what did you start seeing in the water that made it look different?
Just that white stuff coming down the creek, all oily, and when you take a bath in it, it's like you take a bath in lotion.
Residents also say they're getting sick. So what's making the water toxic? State regulators blame a defunct mine nearby. Aaron Beck's story is headlined, "As Coal Companies Point Fingers, Wyoming County residents say they're being poisoned by a contaminated creek." I reached out to Beck to learn more. So Aaron Beck, thank you so much for coming on Inside Appalachia and speaking with us today.
Thank you for having me.
So your story in Mountain State Spotlight is about a community along Indian Creek in Wyoming County, West Virginia. What happened there?
Well, more than a year ago, a Wyoming County resident, James Christian, he found his backyard was flooded. It turned out to be an eruption of mine water from underground, and it was about 2 feet high. It was rising so rapidly that his friend, Richard Altizer, had to run over and help him literally dig a ditch to the nearby Indian Creek to keep it from seeping into their house. And they actually have black mold in their house because of it. I found out about it because during the end of the recent legislative session, Delegate Adam Vance, who represents Wyoming County, pleaded with his other lawmakers in a floor speech for help. He said he had tried every avenue, different state agencies, and it had been going on for a year, and he hadn't been able to see a resolution. So as soon as I heard about it, I went straight to the Capitol to ask him about it. He told me who I should talk to in the community. I traveled there as soon as I could. I saw and heard some things that were very alarming to me. One family told me that their water comes out of the spigot black in the mornings. Lots of people told me that since the mine water had started seeping into the nearby Indian Creek, that it had gotten into their well water and they were very sick because of it. A lot of people described nausea and chronic fatigue. They can't let their kids fish both because of safety concerns and because the fish are dying. At the Christian's house, there's still an overwhelming smell of sulfur. It makes James's wife so sick that she's mostly bedridden. One couple that does have an expensive water filtration system showed me that even after the water had been filtered numerous times, it was still brownish yellow and they're expected to drink it. Bottled water is donated sometimes, but not enough to use every day, not enough for showers and laundry. Richard told me that independent testing showed there was arsenic in the water. I myself could see that the creek was not a normal creek. There was slime floating on the water. There was foam on the water. And James and Richard showed me a picture of a dead deer that they had gutted along the riverbank. They actually saw that its veins were bright yellow.
So all that sounds like a terrible mess. The agency there in West Virginia that's responsible for environmental complaints is the Department of Environmental Protection. How has it responded to this issue?
So shortly after this event happened, the DEP filed a lawsuit against the owner of the Pinnacle Mining Complex. The Pinnacle Mining Complex is an inactive mine. They found that flooding within it was causing so much pressure that it burst upward through a former household well in James' backyard. They filed a lawsuit against Penn MC Wind Down Company, which owns the Pinnacle Mining Complex. But then the DEP allowed the coal company to dig another ditch rather than the ditch that Richard and James had dug. That still resulted in the mine water reaching Indian Creek. The DEP is also conducting water sampling. I actually saw that they were conducting water sampling while I was there. But in the meantime, people are still sick and getting sicker.
And it sounds like this has potential to be a bigger issue. Indian Creek flows into the Wyandotte River and eventually down to the Ohio. But it does sound like there's not been an easy fix.
Right. Mount State Spotlight has reported in the past on some of the reasons why this sort of thing isn't easy to fix. We've reported that courts have been allowing coal companies that are dealing with the inevitable decline of the coal industry by going bankrupt and then establishing spin-off companies. Courts are allowing them to evade responsibility because of that bankruptcy. We've also reported that public officials haven't prepared for the decline of the coal industry by preserving enough money to pay for environmental restoration in places like Wyoming County. Coal companies in the area have also been blaming each other. Once DEP filed the lawsuit, the spinoff company accused Bluestone Resources, which is a company that's owned by the governor's family, of being responsible because it had purchased the flooding mine, Pinnacle Mining Complex. Bluestone countered that they weren't responsible because when they purchased it, they didn't assume responsibility for any and all violations. Then Bluestone sued another mining company that's right there in the area, Alpha Metallurgical Resources. So that's resulted in the case being delayed and delayed. It's more than a year later, and the problem is just getting worse. And meanwhile, none of the coal companies that I contacted responded to me about what they plan to do.
What's the current status of the court situation? Where does this stand at the moment?
Finally, the judge ordered all three companies that are playing a part in this to secure and seal the mine shafts. They haven't done it because they're still arguing about who's responsible. There have been several hearings where the companies are supposed to update the judge on what kind of progress they've made, but they basically keep evading blame or saying they need more time. After my story came out last month, there was another status hearing, but they asked for more time once again.
So has the problem been fixed at all? Are the residents seeing any difference?
No, it's actually getting worse. Since the story came out, I checked in with one woman who I had spoken to when I was in Wyoming County. She said previously her water didn't come out black in the morning like some other residents had experienced, but her water now was coming out black in the morning. Now she's sick with extreme nausea and fatigue. She even told me that she recently went on a trip to another county and she felt like her old self again. Her energy was restored and she felt like a healthy person. As soon as she got back to Wyoming County and had to rely on the water there again, she was back to being sick. I've also seen videos on Facebook. Richard, who I mentioned earlier, he's taken the lead on attempting to organize the community around demanding that the coal companies and DEP take responsibility. He posts videos that show that the Indian Creek is looking worse since it was when I visited it. There are places where the creek water itself is black now. Meanwhile, there's concern that it is flowing into the Guyandotte River. People were telling me that they were affected now and weren't necessarily affected even a month ago. So the problem is obviously spreading. I also just wanted to mention that I've been a West Virginia resident my entire life, and I always hear about environmental problems in the southern coal fields. I've read stories about people being concerned about health problems or the quality of their water, but it really took being there for me to understand the gravity of the issue. Just hearing the disillusionment and the desperation and the anger in people's voices and actually seeing the water that they're expected to drink was very alarming to me. I really hope that because more news coverage is focusing on this issue, that attention will also be paid to other struggling communities in areas where there are abandoned mines and where coal companies have failed to restore the land, and that they can get some help too. I hope that Wyoming County rapidly gets some help. I also hope people take away from this that West Virginia is a state where we haven't adequately prepared for the decline of the coal industry, and this sort of thing could happen to them too. And I hope they don't just brush aside stories as not something that could happen to them, because this is a widespread problem and will be an ongoing problem.
Well, Aaron Beck, thank you for your reporting on this, and thank you so much for coming on Inside Appalachia.
Thank you for inviting me, and you're welcome.
That was Erin Beck, reporter at Mountain State Spotlight. You can find a link to her coverage of Wyoming County and a transcript of this interview on our website, wvpublic.org/Inside Appalachia. Appalachia is full of karst topography, which means it's riddled with caves and caverns. Radio IQ's Roxy Todd recently donned a helmet and knee pads to explore one such cave in Virginia's New River Trail State Park.
Bertha Cave is right off the New River Trail, but there's a locked gate at the entrance to protect people from disturbing bats and salamanders that live here. Winter and early spring are hibernation and mating seasons, so the park waits till late spring to let visitors inside. Tom Malabad works with the Virginia Natural Heritage Program and is one of today's guides.
Virginia, we have something in the general neighborhood of about 4,000 caves.
Most of these are on private land, and others are inaccessible because they have no natural entrance. Luckily, there are some wild caves that even an inexperienced caver like myself can visit, but helmet, knee pads, and headlights are required. The park provides them to visitors. We walk through the gate and hunch down on hands and knees and crawl over craggy rocks to get inside the cavern. Once inside, we can stand. Mud coats the floor and water is dripping from stalactites. In the center of the cave is a rock ledge. The edge of one rock juts out, making a goofy grin. It looks like the earth is sticking its tongue at us.
Tongue is really dripping today.
That's the quote of the day.
Yeah, really.
Aaron Pitts, Chief Ranger at New River Trail State Park, explains that as water flows down into the cave, it moves limestone down with it, forming all kinds of strange rock shapes, like this one.
And it quite very much looks like a tongue, and the tongue is just going to keep growing.
Above us are glowing speckles of what looks like stars. She explains this is actually bacteria that glows in the dark. Darkness is one of the things that makes caves spooky. So is the stillness. But Pitt says the feeling of being inside a cave can be a mindful, meditative experience.
Where you're just listening to the water droplets. It's a unique experience because oftentimes our lives are chaotic and busy and loud. It kind of transports you into a space that very few of us have in our regular lives.
Caves are also signals of the health of the environment above ground. The water that flows through caves is part of what we as humans drink, says Malabad.
And, healthy waters in the cave are a good indicator that, some of the groundwater is also potentially healthy. And vice versa, if you see contamination in a cave environment, then that is pretty much going straight into the groundwater.
Pollution can show up in cave systems, often before it's discovered above ground. Karst ecosystems like this are fragile and can be damaged, explains Malabad, but they can also recover over time. As he's talking, Malabad spots a rare cave beetle in the mud. Like many caves, the animals here have rarely been studied by scientists. Meanwhile, Pitts peers into a mud puddle to see if there's salamander larvae.
And they're very tiny and kind of inconspicuous. And so just like Tom right now, who's looking for a cave beetle that's probably the size of the top of a pin, you kind of have to crawl on your hands and knees in the cave and get a really up-close look.
After about 30 minutes, it's time to leave. No sightings of salamander babies, but we do see a lot of tiny crustaceans inside puddles. Then we edge our way back over the slippery mud and rocks and make our way back out to the cave's entrance. We emerge into blinding sunlight. On the boulders overhead, yellow and pink wildflowers are growing, probably soaking up the same water we'd seen dripping inside the cave. In Wythe County, I'm Roxy Todd.
While we're talking about caves, did you know the longest cave in the world is right here in Appalachia? That's right. It's Mammoth Cave in Kentucky, which most people experience through Mammoth Cave National Park. African Americans played a pivotal role in the park's history and development. In February, the park offered tours about the history of Mammoth Cave's Black Guides. For WKU, Alana Watson went on one of those tours and spoke with the park guide whose enslaved ancestors helped introduce Mammoth Cave to visitors.
Just welcome to Mammoth Cave National Park. My name is Ranger Quinn. An all-black civilian conservation corps group helped create cave tour routes, established roads, and carved out trails at Mammoth Cave in the 1930s. That's just one fact that was mentioned during a ranger-led talk for 6 guests.
1930s. But just a little bit about the Civilian Conservation Corps. Any questions about what I've said thus far? Any curiosities at all?
Among the guests was a man who knows the cave system well. His ancestors were some of the first enslaved African-American cave guides at the park.
It was Clifton, his brother Elsie, and their daddy Lewis were the last 3 Bransfords that were here to render their keys to the cave.
Jerry Bransford is a 5th-generation Bransford cave guide. His great-great-grandfathers, Matterson Bransford and Nicholas Bransford, both slaves, were brought to Mammoth Cave from Nashville, Tennessee, to become 2 of the park's first African-American guides in 1838.
So they explored some of the routes and they learned to read and write. I mean, it was actually frowned upon or illegal for slaves to know how to read and write, but it seems that the record book says they only entertained and had guests as the best educated folks from around the world through the cave. We think that he probably couldn't write a letter, but he was well enough that he could at least write his name, Matt. And we just keep finding his name further out and deeper down in the cave. Yeah.
The Bransford family history at Mammoth Cave is rich and enduring. Matterson's son Henry became a cave guide in the 1860s, and 2 of Henry's sons, Matt and Lewis, were guides in the early 1900s. Before Mammoth Cave became a national park, it was a settlement for over 600 families in south-central Kentucky. Enslaved guides were allowed to own land, and the Bransford family land was on Flint Ridge.
In the 1920s, my daddy used to run barefoot up and down this road.
And down this road?
Absolutely. The homestead was right down at the bottom of the hill there. Oh, wow. He was born in 1914. His daddy was born there in 1876. Great-grandpa born in slavery in 1849.
By the time the National Park Service started acquiring Mammoth Cave in 1939, the 4th generation of Bransford guides were giving tours of the cave system. During the transition, residents had to leave their homes, and under new cave operations, there were to be no more black guides, ending over 100 years of Bransford cave guides. That is until Jerry Bransford came back. Johnny Meredith is a supervisory park ranger at Mammoth Cave. He says when Jerry came back to work at the cave in the early 2000s, he already knew a little bit about his family ties to the cave system. But working there provided him with more details and an even closer connection to his ancestors.
After years of being here and, he's got to go in the cave and see where his great-great-grandfather wrote his name in the 1800s and just various family members and their signatures in the cave. And I know it's been a very emotional and moving experience for him, as I think it would for any of us.
It's emotional and moving because tracing ancestry can be challenging for African Americans, largely due to how records were kept during slavery. Jerry not only knows his family ancestry, he knows where those ancestors are located.
Welcome to the Bransford Cemetery.
Yeah, there you are.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
On a cloudy February morning, Jerry walked us through his family cemetery. It's located in the national park right off of Flint Ridge Road, where the Bransfords originally settled in the 1800s. Visitors have to walk about a quarter mile on a dirt path to get to it.
Then after me coming to work here, after retiring from my first job, I came down here and I saw this. I said, well, this ought to be a place to celebrate instead of a place that makes you feel sad, So I had the idea of cleaning it up.
In front of about 40 small stones that indicate a burial site, visitors will find signage with details of the Bransford family history, a green park bench, and a large black stone with the name Bransford engraved on it, and pictures of Matterson and Nicholas.
And who are the 2?
That's Nick and Matt, my great-greats.
Nick and Matt.
And I got the name of each generation of the guides is on the base stone there, and me being the last one.
Jerry says being able to connect with his ancestors in this way is powerful. While walking to the only proper headstones in the cemetery where his great-grandfather Henry is buried, he tells a story. During the Civil War, Matterson and his wife Parthena had 4 children. And one day, Parthena's master told the couple that he was selling 3 of their children.
Old folks say my grandma said, "Master, please don't sell my children. Would you take me instead?" He says, "You get back to the cabin and I'll whip you again." She laid in deep despair. Those children were tied behind a rod and they were led away from Mammoth Cave.
After the children were taken, a Union soldier visited Matterson after hearing what happened.
He says, Matt, it seems that when you slaves lose your children, it doesn't seem to bother you, they say. Matt said, oh, no, Captain, don't you believe that? He says, slave got feeling just the same as free people. He said, but what can I do about old master sold my child?
The Union soldier told Matterson that the war would be over soon and that he could go back to Nashville a free man. But Jerry says that Matterson told him no.
He said, old master sold my children. I've been in the cave all my life. The cave is in my blood.
Matterson told the Union soldier that if he went back to Nashville, his children wouldn't know where to find him. So he stayed.
And this became our home, never to leave. This became our permanent home.
After working at Mammoth Cave for almost 20 years and giving his family cemetery the care it needed, Jerry retired. He says the years spent at the cave were in honor of the Bransfords, who came before him.
My ancestors left here, and then shortly after they left, it was as though they were never here, you know. I just want to do what I can to recreate their story and tell America what happened. That's what I've tried to do. I've worked for somebody else for a lot of years, but I've given my all working here at Mammoth Cave and trying in a decent way to share with America a true American story. That's what I've tried to do.
There hasn't been another Bransford on the guide rolls since Jerry retired in 2022. But there's a hope that this tradition will continue after Jerry, a legacy started by Matterson Bransford in the 1800s when he decided to stay at Mammoth Cave for his children. There's a hope that a Bransford child will return to the cave and continue the work of their ancestors, who will be waiting for them to come home. In Bowling Green, I'm Alana Watson.
Lightning bugs, fireflies, whatever you call them, they sure make evenings a lot more magical. But like other insect species, they're at risk of decline. Researchers from Penn State have been studying how firefly populations in the eastern U.S. have changed over time. As WPSU's Ann Danahy reports, the outlook is mixed.
Christina Grosinger is an entomology professor and director of the Insect Biodiversity Center at Penn State. She says the research team did not see overall declines in firefly populations, but they did see differences in where and when fireflies do well.
What we found was that there's some ecological regions and ecoclimate patterns that are good for fireflies. So, for example, like warm summers and cool winters are good for fireflies.
Lots of pavement and nighttime light pollution, on the other hand, are bad for the insects. The study includes 8 years' worth of data, with 24,000 observations recorded by citizen scientists in Firefly Watch. To crunch the huge data sets, the researchers used machine learning. Grosinger says fluctuating weather patterns like we've seen in Pennsylvania can affect firefly populations from one year to the next.
You can end up with years where you have very few fireflies, and then that makes people very concerned. But if you come back to sort of better conditions the following year, then those populations can rebound.
Land use and artificial lighting also have an impact on fireflies, which live in soil as larvae. To help firefly populations, Grosinger says to keep nighttime lights low and have meadows where they can find mates. In State College, I'm Ann Danahy.
Nearly half the kids in America under 18 have experienced a serious trauma. Those early events can affect our physical and psychological health. In the next episode of Us and Them, host Trey K learns how abuse, neglect, and violence lead to poor health outcomes. Trey spoke with a West Virginia woman and her granddaughter about the traumas they've lived through. Here's an excerpt.
I expected Em would be shy meeting me, but she is poised and polite. She looks and acts older than her age. She is tall with long arms and legs. There's a lightness to Em that surprises me, given all the heaviness of her mom's death and all that she's been through. She was just 5 when her father shot and killed her mom in the family bathroom. Em was playing outside nearby. She told me what she remembered about that day.
oh, she was in the bathroom, right? And then when I was looking out the window to see what my dad was doing, then I left to go play with a basketball with my cousins. And then I heard a gunshot, and then I hurried up and ran to the bedroom, and then I saw everyone like crying. And I saw like my aunt and my one of my cousins, she was a girl, and my dad hovering over her body and crying. So I was crying because I saw my dad going to jail.
So did the police come and take him away?
Mm-hmm.
What was that like?
Scary, and I was crying a lot because I was like worried about my dad and all of my other family. So.
M's father is in prison now. It took 18 months for Joanna to get custody of M and bring her to West Virginia. M spent nearly a year in foster care, adding more stress to an already traumatic situation. Joanna says that when they were first together, M would not leave her side, even when she went to the mailbox. Joanna says her granddaughter has terrible nightmares and trouble sleeping.
She just wake up screaming and hollering, and I made recordings on my phone, it's long gone, all night long. Nana, 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 I can't sleep. Nana, 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 I can't sleep. This was 2 years. I was not sleeping, so I went in my living room. We slept in the living room for 2 years because she could not sleep. She was having nightmares, scared of her shadow.
That's an excerpt from the latest episode of Us and Them. It's called, Can Early Trauma Last a Lifetime? To hear the rest of the episode, visit us online. Us and Them is supported by the Claude Worthington Benendum Foundation, West Virginia Humanities Council, and CRC Foundation. In 2023, West Virginia officials estimated the state's public schools had 1,500 vacancies. One of them was at Midland Trail High School in Fayette County. Just before the start of the fall semester, the band director left for another job. With no one else to take over, a high school senior stepped up. This story was reported by another high school student, Kelsey Cart, through a partnership with West Virginia Public Broadcasting and Kelsey's school, the Fayette Institute of Technology.
When the school year began, the music-inclined students returning to Midland Trail High School were heartbroken to find out that their band teacher accepted a job elsewhere and would not return as their band director. With the current teacher shortage, there were no teachers to take up the empty position. A long-term substitute was placed in charge of the class. There would be no playing at games, no concerts, and certainly no lively music to lighten the hallways when students passed by the band room. If they needed a director to lead the band, they would have one, in the form of a fellow student. Carol Nottingham is a senior at Midland Trail and the school's acting band director. Passionate to keep the school's music alive, she took it upon herself to see this year's band succeed.
For people who do not know me personally, I have been in the band for 6 years now, something like that, 5 or 6 years. And we have been through band director after band director after band director. So our most recent band director, she got transferred to another school, and we did not find a new teacher.
The principal of Midland Trail, Richard Pettit, shared his side of Carol's story. As replacing the previous band director was proving to be a serious challenge, she came to him in the band class's hour of need.
So we were struggling with filling position with a teacher, with a certified teacher. Miss George had left us, right before school started, and had went to taking a position at Fayetteville. And so we were struggling trying to find a certified teacher to fill the position that had the musical background to instruct and lead. And so once we were struggling with that, Carol just came to me and was like, "Hey, I feel like I can, be an asset to the class and help us keep it moving forward." So
I was like, well, I'm not letting this band sit here and do nothing. So I got approval from Mr. Harper and Mr. Pettit and was like, I'm going to lead the band. So I took them out on the football field. I've been having them march and stuff, so that's really how I started.
Carol's dedication to keeping the band alive and well seeps into the students she leads. Abigail Yates and Mariah Dixon have a particular love for the band, much like their student director, Carol.
Carol's a great teacher. She's, very nice to all of us. She, explains things very well, and she gets along with us.
I wanted to be a percussionist in the marching band, and I've never done it before. It's very fun because she used to be a percussionist as well. She still is and used to be a student as well, so she knows how to better teach people.
She's since she's a high schooler, she isn't meh, don't! She lets us do things, and she's very, because she understands jokes that we make, and we get to laugh along with her, so she's a very cool person.
They're doing great. We all have been warmed up on instruments. We did a few instrument changes after, Christmas and stuff, so they're doing really good. There are some times where I'm I pull things out of my back pocket and I'm like, hey, can you play this for me? And they're like, what does that mean? And I have to break it down. But essentially, for a middle school band, they play at a high school level. They do really well.
I just really look forward to seeing what next steps Carol has for her life, because she's such a great kid. She has a drive and a vision as to where she wants to get there, and I really just think that she's going to be a very successful person, because she's willing to tackle obstacles that a lot of people aren't willing to do.
That story was reported by Kelsey Cart, a senior at the Fayette Institute of Technology. This fall, Kelsey will attend Fairmont State University. She plans to study graphic design. Till next time, thanks for joining us as we journey throughout Appalachia. Our theme music is by Matt Jackford. Other music this week is provided by Sierra Farrell, Amethyst Kia, John Blissard, John Ingram, Sean Watkins, and Little Sparrow. Bill Lynch is our producer. Xander Alloy is our associate producer. Our executive producer is Eric Douglas. Kelly Libby is our editor. Our audio mixer is Patrick Stevens. You can find us on Instagram and Twitter @InAppalachia. You can also send us an email to insideappalachia@wvpublic.org. Visit wvpublic.org/InsideAppalachia to subscribe or stream all of our stories. Or look for Inside Appalachia on your favorite podcast app. Inside Appalachia is a production of West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
Support for Inside Appalachia is provided by Concord University, offering 31 bachelor-level degrees and 6 master-level degrees for students of any age. More information at concord.edu.